For 8 years she sent him money. School fees she never asked for herself. A shop expansion she postponed twice. Nights she went without light because the generator fuel money had gone to Emeka's visa lawyer again. She believed she was building a future with her husband. She had no idea she was funding someone else's. This is the story of Ngozi, the wife who paid for her own betrayal, one transfer at a time. Ngozi and Emeka grew up 2 streets apart in a modest part of Lagos, the kind of love story neighbors still gossip about fondly. A boy and girl who fell for each other before either of them had anything to offer but promises. They married young and they married poor. Emeka worked odd jobs in logistics, never quite landing anywhere stable. Ngozi had a gift with fabric. A small tailoring setup in front of their rented flat, one sewing machine, and a growing list of loyal customers who trusted her hands more than any big boutique downtown. They didn't have much, but they had each other and they had a plan. Emeka's uncle in London had connections. A work visa route through a logistics company that needed drivers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a door. Once Emeka was settled, the plan was simple. He would get established, sort his papers, and bring Ngozi over on a spousal visa. 2 years, maybe 3, and they'd finally be building their life together, just somewhere else. The day Emeka's flight left Lagos, Ngozi cried at the airport, not from sadness but from hope. She truly believed she was watching the first chapter of their real life together begin. She had no idea it would be the last chapter they shared as equals. The first year the calls were frequent. Emeka described his tiny shared room, the cold, the long shifts. He sounded homesick and Ngozi's heart ached for him. When he mentioned needing extra money for processing fees on his work permit renewal, she didn't hesitate. She sent it. The second year brought a new request. A solicitor's fee, he explained, for the paperwork that would eventually let him sponsor her visa. Ngozi picked up extra sewing jobs late into the night to cover it, on top of what she was already sending monthly for his rent, which he insisted was still too expensive for one income. By the 3rd year, Ngozi had learned the rhythm of the requests. A spousal visa consultant who charged obscene fees. An immigration appeal after a supposed rejection. A certified translator for documents. Each one sounded reasonable in isolation. Together, they quietly drained a stream of money that should have gone toward Ngozi's own shop. An expansion she'd been offered twice. A chance to move from her single machine setup into an actual storefront with staff. Both times she said no to herself and yes to Emeka. "It's temporary," she told her sister, who had started raising an eyebrow at how often wire transfer appeared in Ngozi's monthly budget. "Once he settles this last thing, I'll expand the shop. We'll build it together when I get there." Her sister never said what she was thinking. She didn't need to. The look on her face said it clearly enough. What Ngozi didn't know, what she had no way of knowing 3,000 miles away, was that Emeka's life abroad had stopped resembling the hardship he described a long time ago. He'd moved out of the cramped shared room in year 2. He had a steady job, a small flat of his own, a widening circle of friends who knew him as a settled, easygoing Nigerian man building a comfortable life in London. None of them had ever heard him mention a wife back home. It was through one of those friends that Emeka met Abisola, a British-Nigerian woman, warm and independent, who ran her own small events business. What started as a practical arrangement slowly stopped feeling transactional to her. Emeka needed a path to permanent status, and Abisola, flattered by his attention and genuinely fond of him, was open to marriage. To Emeka, it began as exactly what he told himself it was. A means to an end. A marriage of convenience that would finally secure his status, after which, he told himself, He'd sort things out properly and figure out what to do about Ngozi. But convenient things have a way of becoming comfortable. And comfortable things have a way of becoming real, at least for one of the two people inside them. Emeka was, in his own strange way, not a man who set out to destroy two lives. He was a man who lacked the courage to end one before starting another, and so instead of choosing, he tried to hold both. He stalled Ngozi with updates that sounded like progress but were carefully vague. The embassy is backed up. There's a new documentation requirement. My solicitor says we're close. He never gave her a real timeline because a real timeline would have required a real plan. He justified it to himself in the way people often do when the guilt gets too loud to ignore completely. He told himself he still loved Ngozi in his own way, that he'd fix it eventually, as if love could be measured in what he still felt, rather than what he was actually doing to two women who both trusted him completely. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Ngozi turned down her third opportunity to expand her tailoring business. A proper storefront on a busier street, with 2 apprentices ready to start. She told the landlord she needed just a little more time. Every naira she could spare was still going toward a door that had quietly closed years ago, though nobody had bothered to tell her. The truth didn't arrive because Ngozi went looking for it. It arrived by accident the way most devastating truths do. Abisola, needing to reach a family member of Emeka's about a surprise gathering for his birthday, scrolled through his old phone backup for contact numbers while he was at work. She found a number simply saved as Ngozi, and assuming this was a cousin or family friend back in Nigeria, she sent a warm, casual message introducing herself as Emeka's wife, asking for help coordinating a surprise. Ngozi read the message 3 times before her hands began to shake. Hi, I'm Abisola, Emeka's wife. I'm trying to plan something special for his birthday, and wanted to loop in family back home. For a moment she thought it was a scam, but the more she scrolled through what Abisola had unknowingly shared, photos, a shared address, casual mentions of our anniversary next month, the less it looked like anything but exactly what it was. She sat with her phone in her lap for a long time, and she understood all at once the shape of the last 8 years of her life. None of it had ever been building toward her. Ngozi didn't scream. She didn't immediately confront Emeka. Instead, with a calm that surprised even herself, she wrote back to Abisola, gently, honestly, and told her exactly who she was. The conversation that followed was long, careful, and painful for both women, each realizing in real time that they had been telling different versions of the same man's life to themselves for years. Neither woman had done anything wrong. Both had simply trusted a man who had never once told either of them the truth in full. When Abisola finally confronted Emeka that evening, there was no elaborate confession, no dramatic denial that held up under the weight of what she already knew. He tried, briefly, to explain it as something that just happened. Abisola didn't shout either. She simply told him, with a steadiness that unsettled him more than anger would have, that she was done, and that she had no intention of remaining married to a man whose entire legal presence in the country was now something she refused to keep protecting. Abisola filed for divorce within weeks. And because Emeka's settled status in the UK had been tied directly to that marriage, a marriage that had not lasted the length of time immigration rules required to grant him independent standing, his position unraveled almost as quickly as his secret had. He tried to fight it, tried to explain his situation to solicitors, tried to buy time he no longer had money or standing to buy. But the truth had already done what truths do once family members start talking. Once a woman who feels used stops being willing to protect the man who used her. Within the year, Emeka's visa status collapsed entirely. facing removal and with no appeal left that his by-then-empty bank account could fund, he returned to Lagos, not as the successful diaspora husband his own family had bragged about for years, but as a man arriving home with nothing but 2 failed marriages. Word travels fast in Lagos. By the time his plane landed, half the extended family already knew exactly why he was coming back, and exactly what he'd done to get there. Ngozi, for her part, didn't wait for an apology that would never mean anything. In the months after the truth came out, she took the money she would have sent Emeka that year, money that, for the first time in 8 years, had nowhere else to go, and finally signed the lease on the storefront she'd turned down 3 times before. She hired the 2 apprentices. She expanded her client list beyond her old single machine setup into a proper tailoring business with her name on the signage out front. People who heard her story started coming just to see the woman who'd turned betrayal into her own shop. By the time Emeka returned to Lagos, diminished and humbled, Ngozi was no longer the woman waiting by her phone for updates on a visa that was never coming. She was standing behind her own counter in her own store, having built, finally entirely for herself, the very future she had spent 8 years trying to fund for someone else. He came home with nothing left to offer. She had already stopped needing anything from him at all. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who's given everything to a partner abroad, while getting less and less in return, let us know in the comments. And if you believe the real glow-up is always the one you build yourself, make sure you're subscribed. We tell stories like this every week. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.